What's up, my name is Simon, and I am the casual audiophile, and today we're reviewing the Hifiman Sundara. And yes, I'm doing a review because this hobby fucking needs me, because swear to God, you guys would fucking drown in your own shit if I wasn't there. So here I am. Now, the Hifiman Sundara, I bought this headphone with my own money, and I may or may not be returning it at the end of the review. Let's see how it goes. So yeah, no sponsoring, no affiliate, no nothing, just me buying some headphones, comparing it to different shit that I own. And yeah, I have some experience with this headphone before. I tested it at different audio stores from a lot of different sources, and I decided to buy it to complement my HD600, which is my daily headphone, right? Because I wanted something that specifically works well for metal music. So I got the Sundara, because I also wanted a planar magnetic headphone in my collection. Well, how did it go? Let's just jump straight into it then. Okay, let's put in the box. I'll talk about accessories and all the shit later, but first let's jump into the sound, because that's what you nerds care about, and that's what I care about. So let's just talk about the sound. Right, the camera is fucked. So okay, there we go. Okay, so how do the Hifiman Sundara sound? And if you're not familiar with my channel, the way my reviews work is I first talk about the sound in like a brief way, just doing an overview really, and after that I move on to like comfort, fit, accessories and all the other fun stuff, and then I finish doing like more detailed sound analysis and comparisons and stuff like that. So all of this said, you might have noticed that today's video is not live. That is sadly on purpose, because the last video I have been dropping a lot of frames and I just want to see how it goes. If it's like a problem with my PC or if it's just the internet, which I suspect is the case. And if it is, this video is gonna be completely fine. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into what's important, which is how do the Hifiman Sundara sound. And well, I would describe it as neutral with Chinese characteristics. And what do I mean by that? It's basically quite a neutral set. Like basically, if you have the HD600 and the Sundara, in a way, I would actually say the Sundara is closer to like neutral on a graph, and the HD600 seems a little bit mid-forward compared to Sundara. But in practice, I would say the HD600 still sound more natural, but we'll get to it when we get to the comparisons. But yeah, basically this Sundara is supposed to be like Hifiman's, which if you don't know Hifiman, they are a Chinese brand specializing in planar magnetic headphones. It's supposed to be like Hifiman's planar HD600, basically. They cost about the same, and there are some variations. One can be cheaper or the other can be cheaper depending on the region that you're in. And yeah, well, they cost about the same, and they are tuned very similarly. Both of them are neutral. The biggest difference, of course, is that the Sundara uses a planar magnetic driver instead of the more standard dynamic driver in the HD600. So, okay, just going briefly through the sound signature, and as I said, we'll go into more detail and technical performance later, just going with like the pretty much objective sound, how it sounds, right? So for the bass, the bass is pretty flat, it extends pretty well. There's some roll off under like 30 Hz, which is like completely normal for an open back headphone, but it does extend really well into the sub bass region, and the bass is like not elevated at all. Like throughout any part of the spectrum, there is like not a single hint of warmth. It's a very clean, clean, clinical bass that does extend really well. Yeah, so you're not gonna be like, you're not gonna experience like monster bass from this unless you EQ them, of course. But they get the job done. They pretty much show the amount of bass that's like in the mix, right? For the mid range, I found the mid range to be pretty much neutral, but still a bit on the thin side. There is a little bit too little energy in like the middle mids, really, which is like between 500 and 2000 hertz, and a little bit too much energy in the 3 kilohertz region. So what this does is it makes the mids sound kind of thin. It's not nearly as bad as the other Hifiman headphones, but the mid range is still noticeably cold and thin. And as for the treble, well, the treble is, I would say it is also a bit on the neutral, maybe a bit brighter than neutral. There is one peak at 7 kilohertz that kind of bothered me, but it's not too bad to distract from the music. It's not like, a sharp headphone by any means. The treble is there. It is present in the mix, but it is not distracting. Alright, so that's the basic overview of the sound signature of the Sundara. Now we'll go about like all the other aspects, right? And then at the end of the video, we'll go deeper into the sound for audio nerds like myself. So, alright. When it comes to the build quality, this is actually pretty nice. I like the build quality on this headphone. It's pretty much all metal, aside from this bit right here, which is plastic. But it is a nice quality matte plastic, so it looks good. The headband here is, as you can see, it's fake leather with velour on the bottom, which honestly it fits great on my head. I was a bit afraid that it will be a bit too loose on my head, but it has some nice clamp force. The ear pads are, those are also all metal. The grills are metal, and the pads are actually quite deep. They are actually tilted, as in, I don't know if you can see this on video, but the pad is like way thicker on the back than it is at the front, and Hifiman has done it on purpose for both comfort and tuning purposes, and honestly, I gotta say they did a good job with that, because when I put the Sundara on my head, they are a lot more comfortable than I would have expected, because when it comes to the height of the pads, it's actually a bit less tall than my ears are. I have quite huge ears actually, so the pads do pinch my ears just a tiny bit from the top and the bottom, which is not the most comfortable. Sorry, I'm a bit sick, but I actually found out that it didn't bother me that much. Like, I can wear those for good hours without a problem. They are on the heavier side, like they are like twice as much as Sennheisers, but I never had any issues with the comfort. So comfort gets a total pass. I think they should fit a majority of people. I have a very small head, that's why I was worried the clamp force will be too low, but honestly, like, I can even extend it a little bit to the first setting, and it sits on my head completely fine, but I usually just use it, almost at the minimum, just one notch above the minimum, which makes it nice and secure on my head. Like, I can actually headbang in this one and nothing will happen. Pretty good. Nice, secure fit. I'm a fan of that. So, it's got nice build quality. It's got nice fit. So, what about the accessories? Oh god. Okay, so the positives. It comes in a nice box. The box looks good. It has Sundara written in a gold font to contrast with like the black color of the rest of the box. It's one of those like Apple like slow opening boxes that takes fucking forever to open. And inside you get some tuning foam to do a better job than Hifiman does really. Some paperwork, it's bullshit. Some snacks. And of course like the headphone and the cable. Alright, the cable. So here it is. And well, first let's go for the positives. The connector on the side of the headphones, it's just a 3.5mm jack. So you just, it's pretty universal and it's actually easy to replace the cable, right? It's simple to connect. You just put it in the hole and there it goes. It fits into the headphone nicely and securely. Can't really disconnect it really easily, so that's nice. But the rest of the cable, I mean, okay, positives first. I like the material, and that's about it. Like, I like the material of this cable more than the HD600's cable. But holy shit, is this motherfucker tingly. Like, it just wants to curl up and die, pretty much. Like, just all the time. It just wants to eat itself. It's like really bad. And the worst offender of this cable. Like, I wouldn't mind the tangliness, I wouldn't mind the fact that it's a bit short. All of this is fine. But what is absolutely not fine is this bullshit. Why would you place a right angle connector on a headphone meant for desk TPs? Like, especially after you add the adapter, it looks fucking hilarious, right? But the looks are one thing. The worst part is how it looks, how it plugs into an amplifier. This is my Zen DAC, which is my daily use amplifier, and this thing will either go through my keyboard, or it has to stand up like an idiot, or it completely blocks the volume knob. There's like nothing in between. It's better on the tube amp that I use, because that one at least got the jack to the left side of the knob, right? But it still blocks like the power switch from being easily accessible. So just like, why Hifiman? Like, just fucking why? It's like, you look at what Sennheiser does with their connector. Look at this. Nice, straight, with a screw-on jack. Just wonderful. Hifiman, what the fuck is this? Just never do that shit again. It's bad Hifiman, bad. Yeah, that's disgusting, really. I gotta drink. Okay, so I think that's like all the relevant, not sound related aspects of the headphone. So let's delve a little bit deeper into the sound, because like, you know, the sound signature, and that's cool and all, but really the real reason to get a planar dynamic headphone is not for its sound signature, it's for the technical performance. So how is the technical performance on this headphone? Well, I would say when it comes to, let's start with the things it does the worst, and that's gonna have to be dynamics. When it comes to dynamics, it's you know, it's better than most planar headphones around this price point, right? It's better than a lot of other Hifiman stuff like the 400 SE, the Ananda, the Diva, and the Edition XS, but it's, you know, the bass slam is just not that great. And I know that planars can do great bass slam, because I tried like Odyssey planars, I tried the final D8000 Pro, but those headphones are also much more expensive than the Sundara, so that's a concession that's expected at this price point. So yeah, okay, it doesn't slam too hard. You don't buy this headphone if you want like, you know, strong bass slam, no matter how much you EQ it, it's not gonna slam as hard as something like even the HD600, much less something like a Fostex biodynamic driver. So there's that. And also, yeah, let's go to the next thing that's also not the greatest on it, and it's the resolution and detail retrieval in instruments, especially in the bass and treble. The mid-range detail retrieval is pretty good on those. I would say it's maybe a hair better than the HD600, but the detail retrieval in the bass and in the treble really did not impress me too much. Like, when you have instruments like cellos and instruments like you know, electric guitars, and I just noticed that I haven't turned off the fan. Okay, the video should be much easier to tolerate now. And I still got to have a drink. Okay, gotta finish soon because my throat is killing me. That's why you don't record videos while you're sick, but I'm sending those back today. Spoiler, shut up. So, yeah. Okay. Anyway. So, the detail retrieval is fine. If you have in vocals, the detail is actually quite good, but in things like cellos, electric guitars, bass guitars, there's just not as much information as I would like, and that's honestly one of the biggest disappointment of this headphone for me, because I really thought it's gonna be quite a bit more detailed than this one is, but it's really not, sadly. And so, the things it does good though are the things that plainars always tend to do. So first, the crispness, the initial, you know, initial bit of the sound, the decay is really sharp, really fast, and thanks to that you can boost the shit out of the bass, and it will not like bleed too hard into the mid-range, which is nice. Like, if you are a person who likes playing with EQ, that's, you know, that's a very nice thing to have. And I'm really sorry, but I gotta go clean my nose. Be right back. Okay, I am back. So yeah, the decay on this headphone is phenomenal. When you've got things like blocking of guitars, this does it perfectly. Instrument separation is pretty good on this one. Again, not as high as not as good as I expected, but then again, I tried some things that do instrument separation really well. Personally, like the Odyssey LCD-X, which the Sundara is like nowhere near close to that one. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. Like, the soundstage, I honestly have not really noticed it. It's not a narrow headphone, but it's not particularly wide either. And as for the imaging, that part is actually pretty damn good on it. So when it does separate all the instruments from each other, then you've got things like, you know, the placement of different drums parts, or if you listen to like Welcome Home Sanitarium by Apocalyptica, like all the different instruments have their proper place in space, which is really nice. I like that. But there's just one problem with this headphone. It's just not enough, because this one exists, the Sennheiser HD600, and honestly, I bought them to complement each other, and I knew what to expect. This one has better tonality. This one has better technical performance. But the problem is that's not really what I've got, because it's a little bit more complicated than that. So when it comes to tonality, the HD600 is just warmer. It's even though it doesn't have more bass on the graph, it is, you know, it does sound noticeably warmer. There is more detail in and like a better timbre. Oh yeah, the timbre on this one. No, just go away. It's not good. The timbre on this one though, which is like how realistic and natural instruments sound, is way better. Like there is just no contest between the Sundara and the HD600s. The instruments sound much more natural on the HD600 any day of the week. And as for things like punch, it also wins. As for things like, you know, as for things like, okay, let's go back to the tonality first. So the tonality on the HD600 is way more pleasant. It's just nice, warm, relaxed, mid-range centric tonality with just enough bass and treble not to feel boring. And this one manages to feel boring despite having more bass and more treble than the HD600. Like what? I don't know. But yeah, like this one just way better tuned. And when it comes to technical performance, like honestly, I was using the HD600 for quite a bit now, like a few years. Actually, about 2 years, I would say. Maybe that's, I don't know, fucking know. COVID fucked up my perception of time. Anyway, so I've been using the HD600 for a while now. So what happens to this headphone over time is the pads get squished, right? And I was used to how this headphone sounds with like squished pads. So when I demoed the Sundara at an audio store, I was like, oh yeah, this one is more resolving, this one is more technical. But really, when I put them side by side and I started like A/B testing, the difference is not nearly as big as you think once you swap out the pads. Because yes, the HD600 needs maintenance with the pads. The pads, they are just supremely comfortable, but they do degrade over time, right? So if you use it for 8 hours a day, like you do, and like I do, you will need to replace the pads after about, you know, a year, maybe a year and a half, right? If you use them less, then you can get away with like 2 or 3 years without swapping the pads. But like after I swap the pads, they just sound noticeably better. And comparing things like imaging, yes, the Sundara is better. Comparing things like soundstage, yes, the Sundara is better. But comparing things like instrument separation, it's close. It's really close. The Sundara does that a little bit better. But it depends on the song, really. Like, depends on the song, depends on which part of the frequency are those instruments in. Because I would say the Sundara separates bass instruments a bit better. But in the mid-range, I would say the 600 is neck and neck, if not better, at separating instruments than the Sundara, which is not what I expected at all. So, overall, it just ends up as being like the HD600 is just the way better tuned headphone that's also like decently technical, and the Sundara is a bit better in technical performance, but it's nowhere near as well tuned. So I knew this when I was going into this review, right? So I knew this. So I bought the Sundara specifically with the purpose of just like EQing it, adding a bass boost, and, you know, smoothing the treble a little bit, unfucking the mid-range. Like, okay, when it comes to the comparison between this one and other Hifiman headphones, this has got like the best mid-range by far when it comes to tuning. But because Hifiman just can't tune really. Like, let's just admit it. It's 2022. Hifiman cannot tune. Okay, I know. That's my hot take for today. So yes. Anyway. I was like, okay, I'm gonna unfuck the mid-range, I'm gonna increase the bass, I'm gonna decrease the treble, and this is gonna be my set for like, you know, metal music thanks to the technical performance, right? And when testing them without EQ, I preferred the HD600 on pretty much every other kind of music, but for metal music, like, you know, I listened to the song Flag of the Beast by Muir a lot recently because it's a great fucking song. And I prefer the Sundara quite a lot like when it comes to the stock tonality over the HD600. So it's a good headphone for metal, but I was like, okay, but still the vocals are a bit thin. I just want to pull out a bit more out of this music, right? So I EQ'd it. I increased the bass, and actually I will just show you the EQ that I did. Okay. Oh shit, did I close it? Wait a second. Okay. Do I? Okay, I have the settings saved. There we go. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so this is my cue for the Sundara. I increased the bass, right? Do you even see me? I don't know, it doesn't matter. I increased the bass quite a lot. I modeled the bass shelf after the Dan Clark Audio Aeon 2 Noir, which is like the best tuned bass for a planar driver that I heard. So I wanted to do the same thing with like an elevation in the mid bass and pretty linear sub bass, right? And for the mids, I tried to lower like the 2 to 3K, like the 2 to 4K pretty much area, and add a bit more 1.5K to the mix just to make them sound a little bit more natural. And I also killed the peak at 7K, which you shouldn't do it by graph, I did it by ear, and this peak is definitely real. It bothered me quite a bit, so I just lowered it by a couple of decibels, right? So this is my EQ for the Sundara. And with this EQ, this headphone becomes like a really fun bassy headphone. Like that's one advantage of the planar driver. You can like increase the bass a ton, and it will not like destroy the mid range. So that is nice, right? But then I decided, okay, but let's give them a fair playing ground. And I also EQ'd the HD600. Now this EQ is a bit simpler. What I did here was just like pretty much add a little bit of a bass shelf, right? And this is the kind of bass shelf that I like, which is more focused into the mid bass and not the sub bass. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I did with the bass. And also then I just lowered the 2 to 3K area a little bit, because I find the 600 to be a bit too shouty, like stock. But most importantly, increased the treble to the levels I find neutral, and specifically the area between 4 and 6K. To me, is like the biggest problem I have with this headphones tonality is the 4 to 6K area, right? So I increased it, and then I tested both headphones EQ'd, and the Sundara did become. This is like my testing spreadsheet between those, right? I listened to 4 songs, like really with a lot of focus, right? And I compared them with EQ and without EQ. On the first song, Superposition by Young the Giant, I went first Sundara with EQ, then 600 with EQ, then 600 without EQ, Sundara without EQ. On Maybe Don't by Maisie Peters, I went 600 EQ, Sundara EQ, Sundara stock, 600 stock. Right, Leader of Men by Nickelback, I went Sundara stock, 600 stock, 600 EQ, Sundara EQ. And then on the last song, Flag of the Beast by Muir, I went 600 stock, Sundara stock, Sundara EQ, 600 EQ. And what I found was that without EQ, where am I? Okay, yeah. So without EQ, for most music other than metal, I prefer the HD600. And of course, those 4 songs are like not the full extent of the testing I did. This was the side-by-side A/B testing volume matched shit that I did today. But I listened to this headphone like every day for the past week, and this one too, to compare. So yeah, those were my results. Like I prefer the HD600 for every kind of music besides metal, and the Sundara is way better for metal in their stock form. And now in their EQ'd form, the Sundara did become a lot better for music that is not metal. and slightly better for metal, right? But what happened was the HD600 also became better for all kinds of music, but particularly it became a lot better for metal, because there was no like there was no veil between 4 and 6K. It's like taking all the fun out of that music anymore. And what happened was like I ended up with two headphones that I pretty much prefer equally, but turn off the EQ, and one is straight up better than the other, for unless you're only listening to one specific genre of music. So really the conclusion is I'm keeping my HD600. They are just wonderful headphones, and I've loved them for a long time, right? And I really wanted the Sundara. I wanted it to be like a complement to my Sennheisers, right? Just something I can, keep, and I can listen to both whenever I feel like it. But there's just no place in my collection for the Sundara, because it doesn't really do anything that much better from the Sennheiser to outweigh like the things it does worse than it. So I still really do want a planar headphone in my collection, but this ain't it. Like, I love the looks of this headphone. I love the design, the build quality of this headphone. It's a really good headphone. It's just not for me. Like, I'm not, not recommending it, because it's still really good. Don't get me wrong, right? It's still a really good headphone, but it's just not what I was looking for. So personally, I will be returning them, and I just rate those headphones pretty much equally. Like, it's personal preference which one you prefer. For me, it's the 600, because I like the slightly warmer presentation. It just sounds more natural to me. If you like the, more clean, clinical sound, then Sundara may be better for you, and that's completely okay. In fact, if I go to my tier list, which, let's just do it right now. If we go to my tier list on my spreadsheet, right? And actually, before I changed the pads on the 600s, I placed the Sundara above the Sennheisers, but now I'm gonna place it just a bit above, but they are in the same tier. It's like exactly the same class of a headphone. So, it's not like one of them is bad and the other is great. No, it's like both have their pros and cons, right? So, my advice really is I pretty much have the exact same attitude towards the Sundara as I do towards the HD660S. Like, it has some aspects in which it is better than the 600, and has some aspects in which it is not. So my advice is, if it's cheaper than the HD600 where you are, because I know in the US, for example, it is, because in the US this one costs like $300 now, which is crazy, and this one costs like $400, right? So yeah, of course, in that case I would take the Sundara. But here in Poland, for example, the 600 costs like $350, and this one costs like between $370 to even like $420. So in that case, like, just send.